Hi guys, just a quick programming note before we get started on this week's show. We wanted to let you know that starting this week, we're going to be launching the Carbonite Chronicles, and it is a companion show to The Mandalorian. It's going to be like an analysis and discussion show that we'll put out shortly after each new show is dropped on Disney+. So we will keep you posted on the release schedule for that. So be looking for the first episode of the Carbonite Chronicles coming this week, and they will follow weekly after that. Enjoy the show.
It is the year 2472, and the Earth has suffered a great calamity. Hundreds of years of popular culture have vanished. Without the sacred films and text for guidance, civilization is devoid of anything cool. Then, 3 incubation chambers are unearthed. And from within, men from the time of the great blockbusters emerge. Now, through highly interesting conversations, they share invaluable insight about what once was. The movies, the shows, the comics, toys, and books. This is
The Hyperspace.
Podcasting in the 25th century.
Welcome in, podcast pioneers, to the hyperspace, podcasting in the 25th century, the interweb's first and only podcast. My name is Matt.
I'm Jared.
And I'm Mike.
I just got back from the spaceport. Have you been there recently?
I have not.
Not since they shut it down because of that viral outbreak.
That's what I'm talking about. It was spilling out of the men's restroom. They don't know how to control these things once they get out of control. It's absolutely terrible.
I hope they didn't have a reaction to that chocolate they were getting from.
I didn't want to open my mouth. They had their snoopers going around. I just kind of slipped out.
You're like, hey, the guy in tube, whatever your address is,
Yeah, don't say it. I don't need people coming to visit me.
Under your tube
has
platform
21st
again.
century chocolate he was handing out. You might want to start there.
They weren't ready for a Halloween. I'll just tell you that.
No, they weren't. It was kind of a disaster in the 25th century.
Speaking of the spaceport, I have to say I'm slightly disappointed by what I'm seeing in the 25th century. Everyone always kind of had these grand dreams of these amazing spaceships that you'd see in the next century, but they're just not that impressive. They're just not as cool as what we grew up with watching in the movies.
Yeah, they're just like cubes, like scions.
It's just cubes. It's not even like cool like a Borg cube. It's just like a smooth cube.
It's just a cube. Yeah, they're
With a little slit where they can look out while they're steering it. It's really strange.
Yeah, it's completely.
You see like these little eyeballs. You see these cubes with a little slit, with little beady eyeballs staring at you.
I mean, I get it. They pack very nice together, and you can get a lot of the cubes in one spot. But it's just really not that interesting.
Yeah, I know. You miss the you miss like the nacelles of a Starfleet ship, or like the blue glowing engines of a Star Wars craft.
Yeah, it just never happened.
Or the little, what do they call the little things? The Grubbles?
Greeblies.
Just make that the Greeblies.
Yeah, the Greeblies.
Or the Grubbles. The Greeblies or the Grubbles.
Meet the Grubles.
So I think today we should discuss some of our favorite starships in the movies when we grew up.
Yeah,
And kind of share that knowledge with the 25th century.
I think
That's a good idea. Do we need to make a list real quick, or is there
I think we
already
can
one
wing it.
laying about?
I think we'll wing it.
Yeah, we can totally wing it.
Just make it up off the top of our heads.
No, I think that's a good idea. I mean, we have covered previously the Starfighter class of ship and named our favorites there, so it only makes sense to go
Bump it up a
big.
bit.
Yeah,
Let's go
big. So Matt, what are we calling what classifies a starship? I mean, are we talking, does it have to be like 4 kilometers long like a super star destroyer, or
I think we will classify a starship anything that can hold multiple passengers but isn't as big as a space station.
perfect?
How's that?
I like it.
It kind of runs the gamut of a lot of different sizes, but we'll clump them all in there.
That sounds good.
So it carries more than 3 people.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd say it should be able to carry several people, and they should be able to probably walk around within instead of being stuck in a seat.
Yeah, like have crew quarters and everything. Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
All right. Well, I guess that narrows down our mental list.
Good. That's helping me form an opinion.
Well, you form that opinion, but until it's ready, I'm going to take us all into a little bit of random space.
Random access memory.
I'm going to do the RAM today. And this is actually spawned from some interactions that we've had, especially after the Rise of the Skywalker trailer. There's been some people who have posted their opinions about Rise of Skywalker, and some of them, albeit negative, are actually pretty funny. However, that got me to thinking, I feel like it's like, and I think, Jared, you're a little guilty of this. It feels like if you don't like The Last Jedi, then you hate Star Wars. And I don't think that's true, because The Last Jedi is one movie in a series of movies. And I think you can dislike one movie and still be a fan of the franchise.
How am I guilty of that?
Because I've made a comment about it, and you're like, oh, Mike's going to start a I Hate Star Wars webpage or something like that.
Oh, that's the day you were spamming the feed with your YouTube videos. I was like, oh, boy, here we go. No, of course.
But also another thing, too, is I think you can, like, you know, I hope Rise of Skywalker is good. I think there's some problems they have to overcome. But I think some of these videos people are making are pretty darn funny. And they're not shedding it in the most positive light. So I know Matt watched one, and you just turned it off after 3 minutes because you thought it was just taking a dump on it. But I mean, I think part of liking a series of movies is, like, you know, you can dislike one or two of them and give it a hard time.
I agree.
But still be a fan. I mean, it's not like you have to trade in your fan card because you didn't like one movie.
I think part of being an adult that can appreciate a lifelong series like Star Wars is being able to watch someone lampoon it a little bit too and get a kick out of that too. It would be no different than like when I was a kid opening up Mad Magazine and them tearing a movie apart. You'd laugh at it even if you like the movie. So I don't think it's any different now with somebody making a YouTube video, you know, even if it's grieving or hating on it a bit. You know, they bring up some pretty humorous points, even if you don't necessarily agree.
I think if they bring up valid points, then I think it's worthwhile. You know, all but like, you know, there's like funny memes. Like, what's the one I think Matt sent us? It shows Padme at during the childbirth. This one made me laugh. And they're like, they hold one of the babies out, and Padme's like, she'll be a princess on a planet, and then they hand her the other baby, and he can be a farmer on the desert. Farmer. I mean, stuff like that is funny, but at the same time, it is kind of like showing some of the kind of the goofy things of these movies. But I mean, I don't know. I think you should be able to have a laugh at it. I think it's in good fun.
Let me take a turn here. Let me go down a different direction here on this RAM. So I'm just curious. So I don't look. The movie is what it is. We're not going to change The Last Jedi, and there's some things about it which are kind of cool, and there's a lot about it that's not. But the Luke Skywalker arc in that movie
is garbage.
I just don't. I think it's a disappointment. There are some moments that Luke has, like Luke with Yoda. I really thought that was a great scene, and I actually did like the final kind of confrontation that Luke had with Kylo, but it wasn't super satisfying. So knowing that, if Mike, I'll throw it to you first. If you could change the Luke Skywalker arc in that movie, and I don't need anything drawn out, what kind of basic stuff would you do with Luke?
Well, you know, I was thinking about this, and I think the big, huge problem with it is you're sitting through The Force Awakens, and Luke isn't in it. But there's like this build. We got to find Luke. Where's Luke? We don't know where Luke is. We got to find him. Where's the map? There's the map. Here's goes. Come on, we got to find Luke. Where's Luke at? We got to go find Luke. Once we find Luke, everything will be okay. So when you get to the end of the movie and you see Luke standing there, you're like, oh, okay, so Luke's got a plan. Luke has a plan. He's stowed away on this island for a reason. And he's been waiting for someone like Rey to show up so he can carry out this plan. He knew this was going to happen. So you get to The Last Jedi, and there's no plan. He was just hiding. So if I could change one thing, it would be he has a plan, and I think you could go from there.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, actually. Jared, what do you think?
I think that the ending of The Force Awakens, Rian Johnson asked JJ to change it because the original ending had Rey coming upon Luke, and Luke is surrounded by floating boulders as he's meditating. And that leads me to believe that, well, of course, in The Last Jedi, you find out that Luke has cut himself off from the Force, and he doesn't know anything that's going on. But the original plan, apparently, was to have her come upon
Help him reconnect.
Well, no, he was very...
He's floating rocks.
He's
connected.
He's got giant boulders floating all around him, but Rian Johnson asked him to take that out because that didn't fit with what he wanted to do. So I get the impression that the Luke that they found in Episode 8 was not the Luke that was there in Episode 7. So knowing that, I think I would have probably picked up from where JJ left it, and you've got someone who is now, and think about this. This even makes less sense when you dissect it. So Luke he's turned his back on the Jedi and everything they stand for, and he wants nothing more to do with it, right? So obviously, the place you go is the holiest of Jedi places to do this. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see where it starts to fall apart?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it doesn't take long to fall apart.
J.J. Abrams had him go there for a reason. Had him there. The first Jedi temple. Okay, you know what? I hate everything about my religion and I want to kill myself. Where should I go? I don't know. Maybe the holiest place in my religion? Let's go there. Because I hate everything about it, so I'm going there.
Yeah, right.
And I'm going to be a big jerk. So that is, and obviously we're not talking story, we're talking behind the scenes stories, but that's where these two different movies, very different movies that were being made, the lack of planning and foresight really starts to crack the foundation.
Right. It's almost as if thinking it, The Last Jedi, Luke became the hermit for real that Obi-Wan was pretending to be. Mm-hmm. Obi-Wan always had the plan, and he was, he made himself into this hermit in order to not be bothered by society.
It was a disguise.
It was a disguise to keep an eye on Luke. I think they purposely had Luke start to look like the older Obi-Wan, but he became a hermit. But he literally became a hermit in the true sense of the word. So it's just a confusing, junky road that they took Luke down. I think that is a universally accepted kind of truism of that movie. I don't think anybody's debated it. I don't know anybody. I haven't spoken to anybody who's liked the Luke arc in that movie.
Well, I'm going to go back to my original point I was making real quick, because basically I just wanted an excuse to gripe.
That episode's coming up in a few weeks.
Just because I don't like The Last Jedi doesn't mean I hate Star Wars.
Yeah.
So if you think that, you're an idiot.
Are you saying that?
So
I think you think that?
No, I know you don't think I do. I know you were just teasing. But that is like a thing. Like, people do have that, like, if you don't like The Last Jedi, then, they just, it's like, I don't know.
I found
like a form of elitism. Well, I like The Last Jedi, but, of course I'm cultured and I understand how a good film is made. But you're just like a lowly Star Wars fan, so you wouldn't understand.
It's a good chance that most of the people who love The Last Jedi probably hate the prequels.
Yeah.
That's just kind of where we are. But, you know, the average man on the street, girl on the street, you go up to him and say, hey, what'd you think of Last Jedi? I don't know. I mean, it's like that. I mean, just using the workplace as kind of a testing ground for this. I mean, everyone is fine with Last Jedi being the butt of a joke. I mean,
most people. I would say most people. There are a few uppities that are
well,
like,
I don't know.
So, Mike, are you comfortable that you've shared enough about this? Jared?
Well, see.
Jared,
Yeah, look, I just want to say,
Mike,
I'd
it's a safe space, Mike. Let me ask Jared a question. Jared, do you feel that Mike is a true Star Wars fan?
Of course.
Do you feel that him not enjoying The Last Jedi makes him less of a Star Wars fan?
Of course not.
There you go, Mike. See, the hyperspace is bringing this together in this nice 25th century therapy session, and I'm very glad that we could join you two and get you on the same page and move forward.
What is happening in this segment? Can we talk about spaceships now?
We were sure lucky enough to be born in the 70s and grow up in the 80s and 90s, and we got to see some of the coolest ships ever on the big screen.
and I don't think that's an overstatement. I mean, literally ever, like ever, for real, ever.
If you look at everything that is coming out now, it's all a rehash, a redo, make what was bigger, try to make it better, but they haven't yet, and I thought we should share out a few of our favorites.
I think that sounds fantastic.
I'm going to kick it off.
Okay.
Do it.
Gentlemen, when I saw Star Trek II, as a kid, it became one of my favorite movies of all time. And to this day, it's still one of my favorite movies. And part of that was because of the USS Reliant.
You know what was cool about the Reliant is that if you think about, and we did see most of Star Trek chronologically, at least the films.
Yeah.
We were born at the right time. The Reliant was the first that I can remember instance of another kind of Starfleet ship that was still a starship.
Yeah, that I was going to say that exact same thing.
Because
it was the first time you saw like an altered version.
Exactly, because in the original series, all of the other starships were Constitution class ships. They were all just the Enterprise with different numbers on their hull. But for Star Trek, in the motion picture, there were no other starships in that, except, Klingon ships. But by the time you got to Star Trek II, the Reliant was the first ship of a different class that shared similarities with the Enterprise, but was a different thing. And I thought that was really cool. I mean, obviously shared an origin. And you could look at the Reliant and you see, oh, that's a Starfleet ship. The Reliant definitely shares an origin with the Enterprise, with the dish and the nacelles, but just put together in a different, interesting way. And it was the first ship that we had seen like that.
Yeah, it's true. And, in Star Trek II, suspense that they built up in that movie with Khan as a villain and the Reliant as a tangible villain itself helped make that ship even more of a memorable moment, a memorable starship for me.
Well, yeah, it was a Federation. It was a Federation ship. They didn't know that Khan was in it.
As the audience watching, it almost was like a shark when it entered in. From a distance. I always think of it as like a shark approaching the Enterprise.
Well,
I mean, that's such a great scene with the
because,
music, the build-up.
We, as an audience, know the shark is there. The shark is a Reliant. But Kirk and those guys are sitting there like, hey, what are they doing? Well, that's weird.
And you, as the audience, you're going,
oh, my.
Raise your shields!
Yes.
Raise your shields!
That's why that worked so brilliantly.
Yeah. And the Reliant wasn't just a big boat of a ship. It was almost, the way it was portrayed, almost a warship. The phasers were in an aggressive position. It had those great torpedo banks up top. Mm-hmm. It was a ship that meant business.
It was
And
smaller, so it wasn't as big a target.
yeah, I mean, it just had an aggressive stance to it. And I remember I used to make the Reliant in like toys. I had all these toys, and I would like build the Reliant. I never built the Enterprise. I always built the Reliant. But Star Trek II and the Reliant, definitely one of the most memorable starships ever from my youth, and I still enjoy to watch that movie even today.
Yeah. Little nerd trivia for you. The Reliant is a Miranda-class starship, and it's NCC 1864. So,
You remember the prefix code?
I don't. I'd have to look up the prefix code. That way I could
I
turn
think
the
it's
shields off.
16034. I think I could be wrong though.
Raise them!
I can't.
Sir, our shields are dropping. Raise them! I can't!
Our shields are dropping. Well, raise them!
What is it? Like, duh.
And then,
One of the most exciting feel-good moments in like any movie I've ever watched.
Yeah.
That's when
got
Kirk
that
like-
goes fire.
they had just been like kicked in the.
I love when
groin.
Kirk goes, "Here it comes."
Yeah. Here it
Yeah,
comes.
but the best part is my brother and I always laughed because it looks like Khan actually literally has a stopwatch. You see all this technology around him. He's got a stopwatch. He's timing it.
Yeah, he does that weird move where he's like, "Time's up!" Like he just turned it off.
Yeah. He may have had one. You never know. He was a genetic Superman from the 1990s. I think the Reliance an excellent addition to the list. Certainly worthy of inclusion.
Yeah, I thought it'd be a good one to kick off with. Mike, what's next?
I'm gonna pick. I believe it's a Ralph McQuarrie design, as the other Star Wars ships that we haven't talked about yet. The Galactica, the Battlestar Galactica from the original
Yes.
TV series. That's a cool looking ship. Not only is it cool looking, but I think one of the things that really makes it unique and stand out from other types of ships are the two landing arms, or whatever you call those things that are attached. And I just thought that was so cool that I mean, basically it's like a carrier, and that's where the ships land. I just thought that was just a really neat looking thing. But if you watch the show too, what I really like about the Galactica is it feels like a big slug, like a big giant tank, and it feels almost like a relic. Like it doesn't feel very sophisticated. You know, does that make sense? I mean, it feels like it's almost like it's running on gasoline.
Yeah, it's chunky. It's got the big engines in the back.
There's nothing fancy about it. It serves one purpose, but now it's having to be like hold human beings on this long voyage that it was never really designed to do. Cool.
If you remember the mythology of the original show, the Galactica was hundreds of years old.
Yarns old.
Yes, by the time the show happened, it was, I think, like 500 yarns old. Which
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
It was one of the few remaining like battle stars.
It was the only one left other than the Pegasus.
Well, they lost one in orbit when Caprica was attacked. I don't remember which one went down.
There was a bunch of them. They all got destroyed.
Yeah, they had several.
Wasn't there one for each colony or something like that or something? I don't know.
I believe so.
I have to
Galactica was the
rewatch the
last
series at some point. It's been a while.
Yeah, there was a bunch.
But but to what Mike was speaking about, it was 500 years old at the time of the series.
Right.
So you comparing it to some relic from another age is appropriate.
But it's also one of those ships that, you know, you were talking about like movies now. I think a lot of ships, I mean, while they're cool looking, their designs are they're hard to identify. Like you don't look at a ship from a new movie and you don't like instantly recognize it, because it's almost like with the CG they can do any sort of shape with them, no matter how outrageous it was. But back in the 70s and the 80s, the ships were models, so they were a little bit more simpler. And the shape, you could look at an outline of the Battle of the Galactica, and you would know instantly it was the Galactica. And I think that's that's one of the cool things about it. It's still like a unique looking ship as well.
Agreed.
They were clever in that show by using the Vipers as, another ship in space, because it let the Galactica feel like what it was. It was their home, and they weren't always in it. They were out in space fighting, and then they would come back. So there was a real connection that as the viewer, you needed them to get back to their home.
It was their place of safety. Like that was a cool thing about the first episode when Apollo goes out with Rick Springfield, and they're racing to get back to the Galactica, to their it's to their base, and it's like it was really like a tense moment, a scene that really kind of made that show kind of stand out from the very beginning.
It was also outfitted with the newest in VIC-20 computers.
High tech.
I have to say, in the reboot, the Sci-Fi Channel reboot, I liked the new Galactica also. I don't think it was such a departure from the original.
No, it retained the shape.
You look at the Pegasus in the new series, and that looked more like the original Battlestar Galactica than
it was
Galactica
bigger and like chunkier.
Yeah, it had a much more of a familiar profile, the Pegasus, to the original Battlestar Galactica. But I liked in the new series even how everything was analog, in the sense they had corded phones, and it was cool. It was clever, and it wasn't cheap in what they did, and I think it was very true to the original series.
Yeah.
And
Well, in the pilot, it was being decommissioned, and it was going to be a museum ship, which we talked a little bit about that before, where all the old Vipers were on board that the Cylons were not able to hack into.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean the shape. I like the just the look and the shape of the Battlestars, and particularly the original, just because it definitely has a very Star Wars kind of feel to it, just with the way the model looks, with all the greeblies on it, the extra little details.
You and your greeblies.
And the kit bashing they did to make
It's
it.
what adds the scale to it.
Oh man, if you look at the Galactica, it's just like they took 1,000 model kits and found little pieces and just glued them anywhere they could.
Yeah. But I remember real quick one episode where there was a fire on the Galactica and they had to go outside and walk around the hull.
There's footage from some TV show where it was obviously like out some factory or oil refinery that was on fire.
I'm thinking about when they put them out onto the hull, like Starbuck and Apollo get in spacesuits and they go out onto the hull,
and their skin was exposed.
You see the wires, man. It's like they didn't even try. They're like, crap, there ain't no getting around this. Hey, look, they're on a harness, and it was it was really evident.
Well, at least they weren't in those weirdo sport uniforms, whatever the hell that was.
Oh man, they could. I think they stole them off the set of Zardoz.
I forget what they called that sport. That was terrible.
Yeah, that ball game they played, and it was like basketball and like rugby all in one or something. It was weird.
It was terrible.
Oh,
but hey, the Battlestar Galactica, from the good to bad, it was one of our favorites.
Absolutely.
All right, you're up next, Jared.
Okay, so next we're going to talk about a ship from a TV show and a movie, and it's called Serenity, and it is a Firefly class ship from the television show Firefly and the film Serenity. And it is a ship, this list is dominated, spoiler alert, by a lot of ships from two franchises. But this one stood out to me as a ship that was unique. It had a lot of character. It had some characteristics of ships I enjoy from other franchises. And just a really cool ship. And I know Matt has a lot to say about this.
That was a series I missed. And I actually am glad I missed it when it did air.
Because it aired all out of order. And
yeah, it was a disaster when it aired. And I remember Jared had sent me an email. And he said, "Have you watched this show yet?" I'm like, "No, I just kind of skipped it." And he's like, "You should watch this show." So I got the the DVDs, and I think I binge watched them all in one day.
Yeah.
I was blown away by how great and how fun of a series that was. And I kind of had wished I'd seen it when it aired, but then when I heard how it aired, I was very glad I watched it the way I watched it.
Yeah.
You know, Joss Whedon had said that he wanted to make a show about Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon because he felt that was his favorite part of Star Wars. And he's like, I wanted more adventures with those guys in that ship. And he kind of designed a show in that kind of vein, that he wanted a crew in a ship having adventures, and that's what they did. Mm-hmm. And the Serenity really had that kind of attachment feel, that real kind of homey feel. Yeah. And it was cool. It had like different compartments and different rooms, and the crew quarters were small and dirty, but you know, you felt that it was real and being lived in. And that ship felt lived in to me watching that show.
And I always had a very good sense of geography of that ship. Like, I knew where everything was on that ship. Like,
yeah, that's a good point. Well, they had built the ship in its entirety in soundstage in several different components. So every time they walked to a place, it was always consistent.
Yeah, and they could do it like in one unbroken shot because they were inside basically a shell of the ship.
And that's a great point. And it always did. That's a great point. That ship, you always knew where you were. Mm-hmm. You always did. And just a few episodes in, you knew where you were in that ship. And that's, I think, a testament to Joss and his designing of that in the physical set that they were in.
Yeah. And it's a great little ship. And, you know, it's something that wouldn't look out of place like in a Star Wars movie.
No, I agree. And, you know, I like that it wasn't perfect. I like that it had problems.
What was that? Did you see that? Was that the primary buffer panel? It did seem to resemble... Did the primary buffer panel just fall off by Graham ship for no apparent reason? Looks like. I thought Kaylee just checked the entry codes. Yeah, well, if she doesn't give us some extra flow from the engine room to offset the burn through, this landing is going to get pretty interesting. Define interesting. Oh God, we're all going to die? This is the captain. We have a little problem with our entry sequence, so we may experience some slight turbulence and then explode. Can you change the vector? I'm doing it. It's not enough. Now just get us on the ground. That part will happen pretty definitely.
They were always barely keeping it running.
Yeah, and it just was always in some kind of trouble, and there were some great episodes. Some of my favorites when the Serenity broke down in space. I forget the name of that episode, but I'll have to look it up. But where Mal had to get one little crappy part, but without that part, the ship wouldn't move. And, you know, you really saw the whole exposition of his acquiring of the ship and his love for that ship. And you know, you felt very attached to the Serenity watching that show. So, yeah, the Serenity is a really interesting, great ship. And it could go planetary side, it could go in space. You know, it was a very versatile. Yeah. And it felt that that's the kind of ship that you kind of like, you're like, I would like that ship. Like, if I had to be in space, I'd like a ship kind of like that.
Yeah. Something with character, something that you could, like, sleep on, that kind of thing. I mean, it's...
something that was small enough that you could still control.
It's like...
But big enough to be a home.
Yeah, it's kind of like... it's like our buddy Lone Star's Winnebago in space.
That's a great honorable mention, by the way. I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, but it is that kind of thing. It's like it's your home that you just take everywhere.
Right.
And I know Mike has not yet consumed Serenity, but we'll hopefully correct that in the near future. So,
Mike, that's an easy one that you can get through very quick. Firefly is a real easy series, and you won't regret watching it. It's really fun.
Yeah, and I you know, a lot of people think that Joss Whedon's dialogue is a little too cute for its own good, and I would agree with that. But Firefly it has a little of that, but it's not to a huge degree that really detracts from it.
He definitely wove in a lot of comedy in that writing and a lot of tongue in cheek, but you know, there were still some very serious, very legitimate sci-fi moments in that show, which I think stand up and hold up to some of the greats.
Yeah. So, Firefly.
Okay. Well, I'll check it out sometime.
So next on this list is the Defiant from Deep Space Nine. Now, the Defiant is, yet another Star Trek ship, a Starfleet vessel. It was actually created as the story goes, it was created to fight the Borg after the Battle of Wolf 359, where Captain Picard was assimilated and Starfleet was decimated. They put into production this new class of ship that was basically all it was engines and weapons. It was designed to just be like an ass kicker. Mm-hmm. And it definitely looks completely different than most other Starfleet ships that we're familiar with. There aren't any detached nacelles. It's all kind of one piece, kind of an oblong disc with these big engines kind of mounted directly on the side and like an elongated nose where the bridge sits. But the Defiant, it really had some standout moments on Deep Space Nine. It was given to the crew of Deep Space Nine. In the third season, there was an enemy that called the Dominion, that started to really threaten the Federation, and Deep Space Nine was right there at the forefront of that, and they were given this ship, and there was the conflict. The Dominion War basically consumed the last half of that series. The last few seasons of Deep Space Nine were primarily about the Dominion War, and it's actually some of my favorite Star Trek that's been produced. I thought it was definitely ahead of its time in that it was highly serialized in an era where that was really frowned upon by the networks and the syndication people, because it was always easier just to do one-off episodes that you could kind of watch anytime you wanted. But this is a series that really benefits in the Netflix era of kind of a bingeable show. And the Defiant was part of some of the coolest space battles that have been put on TV. And since this was produced back in the mid to late 90s, that's really saying something, because it wasn't just a matter of creating everything on a computer back then. There were models being used, and it was some really impressive stuff. And the Defiant for me is like a real standout Star Trek ship because of that.
Deep Space Nine, I watched it from the start, and when they introduced the Defiant, to me that was kind of a lifeboat for that series.
Yeah,
because it really started to become, I wouldn't say boring, but I was becoming disinterested pretty quick in that show, mm-hmm. with them being static on that space station. I just, the spirit of moving around in Star Trek wasn't happening for me in that show. And even though it had great characters and some comedic moments, I needed more. I needed to feel it was more in the vein of what I was used to. And when the Defiant entered into that series, that kind of gave me the reach in that show that I felt I was missing. And it was a real big piece of that puzzle, that missing puzzle piece, that helped really let me enjoy that show a lot more.
Yeah, it opened it up.
And it had one of my favorite scenes with Worf at the helm.
Oh, in First Contact?
Report!
Main power's offline. We've lost shields. Our weapons are gone.
Perhaps today is a good day to die. Prepare for ramming speed!
Sir, there's another starship coming in. It's the Enterprise.
Oh, such a great scene.
Yeah. And I was like really hyped to see the Defiant on the big screen, if only for a brief moment. It was cool. And then, Worf gets a little mad at Riker when he's like, "Hey, tough little ship." And Worf,
little.
Welcome aboard the Enterprise E, Mr. Worf.
Thank you, sir. The Defiant.
Adrift, but salvageable.
Tough little ship.
Little.
So, yeah, the Defiant is it's a really cool little ship. little. And I do have the Hallmark Christmas ornament that I put on my tree every year of the Defiant.
I think this holiday season, the hyperspace will post a picture of Jared's tree. It's it's quite a testament to nerddom.
Yeah. Well, I'll be happy to share some of those this year.
I think you should get a nice big shot of it, and then just all your little Griblies.
Greeblies, yes.
Greeblies?
Yeah. Those are little, it's just like kit bashing. It's little extra bits that really don't do anything, but are supposed
Show all your extra bits on your tree.
Silence immediately.
All right, I'm gonna lob this next one over to Mike.
Okay.
Well, real quick, I'm just going to say the only familiarity I have with Defiant is from First Contact.
Okay.
'Cause I didn't watch Deep Space Nine, so
okay,
that's my input. All right. My next one is the Nostromo from Alien.
Good choice.
That is a cool-looking ship. It looks exactly what it is, like a mining ship. Even like perhaps refineries.
Big
in there.
industrial.
The cool thing about the Nostromo, aside from that, that was another ship that they built. Like the ship was a set. Like they actually built the interior of that ship where the actors would move around in it as they would as their characters, as if they were on a real ship. But the thing that I really like about that ship is they made that game Alien Isolation. You're on a sister ship of the Nostromo, but I can't remember what it's called. It's called something else. You explore this massive thing, and it is ridiculously huge. And there's like so much in it. Like it's just insane. It's just nuts how expansive. And even at one point, you actually go outside of the ship, and you're walking around outside, and you're moving like dishes around and stuff like that. I mean, I was kind of wishing I could just like not have the alien chasing me down, just so I could explore the ship freely without being worried about getting killed, because this thing is so gigantic. So that's part of the reason I picked this. But of course, it's a classic movie. It's a great movie. Anyway, that's definitely one of my favorite ships. I think a lot of it was shot in camera too. I don't think there was a lot of like blue screen with that. I think because
when it's landing, when it's landing on the planet, that's definitely on a giant set.
Yeah,
with a big piece of the ship.
Another thing I really liked about that I thought cool that really added to the scope of this thing was when the countdown was going down, and they showed the exterior of the ship, and you could hear the countdown coming through these speakers that were outside.
Yeah, like echoing.
6, 5, 4, 3, 1. Override detonation procedure has now expired.
Mother! I've turned the cooling unit back on! Mother!
Yeah, and it just really was like, I don't know, there's something about that just made this ship just feel huge, that it was so big that they had to put these speakers around to make sure everyone heard this countdown.
Yeah, but the part of the ship that lands on the planet, I think that's probably what you would consider to be like the tug, like the tugboat that's pulling that giant platform behind it.
Well, he also is the lander.
Yeah, I think it's like, collectively, you would know better as you played the game, but is that entire structure like inhabitable?
Well, in the game, yeah, you're traveling all through that thing.
Okay.
You just can't. It's hard to describe how huge it is. It's just massive.
Yeah, because we don't really see that in the movie. We just see them.
No, it's sort of like in the game. It's been repurposed. It's been kind of turned into like a living, kind of like a mall / research facility,
like a city type thing.
Yeah, sort of like that. Yeah, there's like trams that move from side to side and stuff like that.
Obviously fitting the theme of the movie. It felt very cold, that ship watching. It didn't feel very welcoming, the Nostromo.
Oh, no.
The shots, the color choices they chose, it felt very cold as a ship.
Yes, I agree.
But I liked it. I liked it because it did look. Ridley Scott took a cue from Star Wars, and it looked like a ship that was in heavy use. It looked
and functional.
Yeah, it looked used and it dirty and
like there was ashtrays on the consoles.
But I kind of feel that that's the kind of ship that NASA would be building in 200 years.
Yeah.
Well, it is essentially, it's like an 18-wheeler in space.
Well, another thing too is that I like, and it's actually because when you watch Prometheus, which is supposed to take place before Alien, the technology on that ship is way more advanced than what you have on the Nostromo. But I think it kind of adds to it as it's sort of like the same thing with the Galactica. When they built this ship, they put all this software in it, and it all still works perfectly fine. So there's no reason to ever upgrade anything.
Yeah.
So it's still running on version 2 of whatever software that they installed in that thing, and it's totally fine. Who cares? We don't need to upgrade it. And that's kind of like the backstory I imagine about just kind of like consolidate the differences between those two movies, since one is supposed to be a prequel to another.
Yeah. Well, and I thought the Prometheus it had a similar look. It obviously was a lot more advanced looking, but it had the same feel to me of the Nostromo.
Yeah. I'm going to go off topic. Not off topic. It's on topic, but it's off a little bit. But, there's even the scene
this
where
isn't
they're
about
in
the Last Jedi, is it?
No. They're in the room, and you have like the nudie pictures that are taped on the wall. Do you remember?
In Alien.
Yeah, in Alien. Anyway, this reminds me, my dad, he works on caterpillars. And a lot of the times he goes to job sites to work on stuff. Well, he's retired now. He just recently retired. But he used to go to job sites to, if something was broke down, obviously that's where he would go there to fix it. And, the dumps have a lot of, that type of machinery there. So he would unfortunately have to go to work at the dump to fix these things. And he said one time he had to get into the cab of something. And he said that the guy made a comment like, "Oh, yeah, if you see anything in there, help yourself to it." And my dad turned and looked, and he said there was like a stack of the nastiest pornography he'd ever seen in his life, like sitting in that cab. And he said, and it was almost like it was kind of suited the people who worked there. But anyway, I guess that doesn't really have anything to do with what we're talking about, but that just kind of made me think of that.
Except
the
disparage people who use caterpillars.
Well, work at the dump more
He
like.
washed his hands after he's
I know. Dude, don't take a black light in that cab.
Jeez. Anyway. That's why I like the Nostromo. But
all right, so Matt, what do you got next for us?
Yeah, I'm not going to take a lot of time on this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. The classic Star Destroyer from A New Hope.
Oh, yes.
Has to have a quick mention.
Of course.
The Star Destroyer in A New Hope is probably one of the most memorable movie scenes of all time.
I think it's safe to say it set the bar from that point on.
Absolutely.
No question.
And the Star Destroyer had such a unique, intimidating demeanor about it. There was nothing like it before, and there really hasn't been anything like it since. It was a very deliberate look to it. Hard angles, Jared's greeblies everywhere.
Yes.
It had a look of, like, it meant business. And the Star Destroyer always had that aura of, this is the official Imperial ship. The TIE fighters, of course, are amazing, but it's the Star Destroyer that, to me, always represented the power of the Empire. And whenever they're on screen, I always think it's one of the most amazing shots you ever see. From the from the Imperator class to the Super Star Destroyers. They're just all amazing. But that original Star Destroyer just has to be mentioned. It has to give it a little bit of time in the light.
I mean, how can you not? In that opening scene, that it just keeps going and going.
That opening sequence in Star Wars, to this day, still looks amazing.
Of course. Absolutely.
It just, to Mike's point, it sets the bar so high for science fiction.
And crazy to think that the model of the Tantive 4 was larger than that Star Destroyer model.
That's movie magic, Jared.
That's what they call movie magic. That's right. You jerk.
I don't know how it fit inside.
No, I don't either. Yeah, you don't have to. It's magic. It's movie magic. It's the Force. But yeah, the Star Destroyer absolutely needs to be mentioned.
But the Star Destroyer had a foil.
Oh, it did. It certainly did.
Was that one ship that could never, ever catch. That ship that made Star Destroyers
crash into
each other.
And, you know, a ship that small doesn't have a cloaking device. Of course, we're talking about the Millennium Falcon. Oh, the Falcon. Man, you know, where do we even start? What can be said that hasn't been said?
Well, it's modeled after a cheeseburger.
It certainly is. That's as the famous... I was in a restaurant. I was sitting there. I was sitting there sniffing my fingers, and
took a bite of my cheeseburger.
And I was eating this cheeseburger. And I thought,
I said, "Hey Harrison, come over here.
Hey Harrison,
how would you like to sit on this? Make it a plane."
Harrison, get your hand out of Carrie's shirt. Come over here.
Oh, dude,
come over here. Let me smell your hand. Okay.
Oh God.
Okay. Yeah, you know, George was sitting there eating lunch and thought, you know, this hamburger looks kind of like a spaceship. And you know, the original Millennium Falcon didn't look like the one we know today.
Wasn't it the blockade runner?
It was. But then Space 1999 came out before Star Wars, and George thought the ship on that show looked a little too similar to what he had in mind, so he wanted it changed. Which I think is to its absolute benefit.
Oh yeah. It's got way more character than the blockade runner.
Absolutely, so many great Falcon moments. So while we're talking about the Falcon here, what are your favorite moments that the Falcon has been involved in?
Well, I think Empire is my favorite because it's pretty much most of the movie they're spent in the Falcon, and I think the scenes I really enjoy the most are when they're resting in the slug's mouth.
Yeah,
I think you have a lot of great Falcon moments in there. You know, just that they're just trying to patch this ship up, and you know that's some of my favorite Falcon stuff. Empire is pretty much a movie for the Millennium Falcon.
Of course, absolutely. What about you, Matt?
I like it when he's in Mos Eisley's docking bay 94.
Mm-hmm.
And when it powers out to escape the stormtroopers.
Julie, get us out of here! Oh my, I'd forgotten how much I hate space travel.
That moment in Star Wars is like a big heavy moment for me. Watching the Falcon power out and the adventure has started in a sense to me. You know, that's they're in motion at that point. And there's a lot of good emotion when it comes to watching that. So I always like seeing the Falcon powering out and escaping.
Yeah. One of my favorite moments with involving the Falcon is actually from The Force Awakens, when they're trying to when Rey and Finn are running away from the TIE fighters and the ship they want blows up, and she says the garbage will do, and they pan the camera and there's a Falcon.
We can't outrun them!
We might! In that quad jumper!
Hey! We need a pilot!
We've got one!
You Ah! What about that ship?
That was garbage! The garbage will do!
Oh yeah, that was a good moment. That was a big surprise.
Yeah. And then, and that's, of course, the first time you've seen it on screen in so many years. And it was like seeing an old friend again. And
well, it's a surprise because you just expect Han has it. You didn't know he didn't have it at that point.
And another one of my favorite little Falcon moments comes from Force Awakens, where it's a quick moment, but it's when Han walks into the cockpit and he just stands there and kind of looks around and like smiles. And, it's 70-year-old Harrison Ford standing in the cockpit of the Falcon again, which I just love that. If I could, print that out as a picture and have him sign it, that would be, amazing. But that's one of my little favorite Falcon moments from recent years. And I'll say, I really hope I get the opportunity soon with you and Mike to board the Falcon at Galaxy's Edge. Because, look,
yeah, it's on the bucket list.
I don't even care, what your opinions are of new movies, anything. You get onto the Falcon, and you people of our age, it's something special, and it's really cool.
I said it in a previous podcast. It's like our Graceland.
Yeah, and it's really cool. And having crashed the Falcon several times myself now, it's an amazing experience to be on it. So,
way to go.
Yeah, I know. But the Falcon it could not be on this list. It's one of the best ever. But I think we all unanimously picked our favorite ship. It's not even close for the three of us. And that is no, you got to play the bum 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 bum, the motion picture music.
The Enterprise. That ship. Talk about a ship that is easily identifiable. There's no mistaking. The Enterprise.
And I think specifically, what we're referring to is the motion picture era Enterprise, the Constitution class refit, or the NCC 1701A, which are, of course, the same ships for all intents and purposes. But that is just a beautiful ship. Still the best Enterprise by far.
In the dark times when there was no more Star Wars after Jedi, there was a lot of Star Trek. And, I spent a lot of my youth watching Star Trek and reading Star Trek novels and, watching The Next Generation. There was a lot of Star Trek in my life.
Yeah. Star Trek
growing up.
was
much
my
more
companion.
so than Star Wars at that time.
Well, there was so much more Star Trek than there was of Star Wars.
I mean, there was a big chunk of your life was Star Trek, and it was great. And for me, even though you had The Next Generation, which is a great show, you always went back to the movies, and you'd be lying if you said that wasn't your favorite Enterprise.
Oh, absolutely.
If you told me The Next Generation Galaxy class was your favorite, then you can just go to
Yeah, I was never really a big fan of the D. I just thought it looked weird.
Yeah, the D was it wasn't, I don't know, even though it was much more, of course, rounded and sleek, I guess, but it never, I mean, I like it fine, but it didn't have the same, to me, it just didn't have the same charm and impact as the Enterprise, the original, or the A.
Yeah, I mean, the original Enterprise looked like it could take like a pounding, and it did take a pounding.
Yes, it did.
It was just like a good, strong, sturdy ship. It looked functional. Mm-hmm. Like, you had the two different, you had the hangar and the bottom hull, and you had the dish.
Yeah.
Where everything, the bridge it was cool that the bridge was on top of the dish. And I mean, basically it was like a windshield, they could see where they were going.
Yeah.
The sensor array in the front, which, originally it was like a dish.
A radar dish,
but it just looked like it had a soul.
Yeah.
That ship made perfect engineering sense to you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it made sense in space. And the Enterprise was the first home in space for you. Everything else tried to be like the Enterprise in that sense.
Yeah.
And of course, Star Trek was a huge success because it had a great ensemble cast, and a great cast, including a great ship, makes a great show.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you had great success in Star Wars. That's why you had great success in Firefly, even though Firefly was canceled. Great success in Battlestar Galactica, because great cast members, great characters, which include a character which is a ship, makes a great show.
Yeah.
And that's where Star Trek really, was a trailblazer in that whole kind of genre, where making the ship a character, in a sense, was part of it.
Well, I think, as much as I like Star Wars, I think the characters on the original Star Trek show, those characters feel more real to me than the characters from Star Wars.
Yeah, because it's, they're us, they're people, but they're just in the future. We're not talking about like a fantasy that's long ago and far, far away. And they're more, I think, more relatable. Everybody knows somebody like Dr. McCoy. I know somebody like Dr. McCoy. His name's Mike. He co-hosts this podcast. But yeah, the characters certainly made you care about what happened on the ship. But I would even say the ship, the original from the original show, I mean, it had basically the same profile as the motion picture era ship. And when they recently went back in the last 10 years or so and sort of redid the original series in a special edition with updated effects and everything, there were some really cinematic shots on that redo of the old ship where it looked really cinematic.
Oh yeah, like the Doomsday Machine.
Yeah, and
that episode is amazing.
That, like Matt was saying, that shape is so the profile is just powerful and cinematic in itself.
You can get so many cool angles on it. You know what I mean? There's just so many different ways you can shoot it.
When it comes out of warp speed into the Genesis orbit, I think that's my favorite shot of the Enterprise in any movie, in any show. When it's entering orbit and you see it come past the camera and you're watching it from behind.
Yeah, it's a great shot.
An amazing shot.
I just was able to see just a month or so ago the motion picture on the big screen, and of course they have the infamous Kirk and Scotty flyby where they
takes 37 minutes.
Yes,
I love that scene. I love it.
Look, you're sitting in a theater, man. I was soaking everything up. I mean, that sequence was meant to be seen on a 60-foot screen. It was, and people criticize that scene a lot as being gratuitous, but it was really, and it looked big. I mean, it looked like that scene, better than any other scene in any of the other films, just showed like how big that ship was, and you got a sense of scale and like of power. And like I said, the redesigned Enterprise for the motion picture was, I think, it absolutely holds up today. I think better than any subsequent attempt at any Starfleet ship since. It's like perfect. It's not dated. It doesn't look like it was designed in the mid-70s. It looks like it could have come out yesterday. It's a perfect design for a ship. I love it. I love it a lot.
Yeah, I'd love to. I wish I could have seen that on the big screen like you did. That flyby has a very like Stanley Kubrick kind of 2001 feel to it.
Oh man, and Goldsmith's score for that. Oh man, if you don't like that scene, man, there's something wrong with you. That's just a great scene to sit and watch and just enjoy the music and just get a good eyeful.
Because that's what Kirk and Scotty are doing. Because you got to think those are also probably two of the characters from the show that appreciate that more than any other characters would be Kirk and
that's
Scotty.
true.
You know, because Scotty's like, hey, there's my ship, Captain. And Kirk's like,
hey, you want to see something cool?
and Kirk is, kind of seeing his woman again for the first time in a while. And she's had a lot of work done, but he's obviously very impressed. I mean, he walks out of that shuttle with a giant erection.
Oh my.
That's not what happens. But no, but it's a great scene, and it's great that it's those two characters. And you can tell like Scotty is enjoying showing it off.
Well, he's been working hard on it.
Yeah, the Enterprise or the Enterprise A, it tops our list for good reason.
And it should top your list.
Yeah. So
or you're a jerk.
Yeah, exactly. Or you're some kind of Klingon scum. I got no time for you and your bumpy foreheads.
If you ever pick a ship from Avatar, you're just the worst person.
Was there ships in that?
Would you see James Cameron made his little announcement that Disney Plus is going to be showing it?
No, I didn't see that.
That's fantastic.
It's like, really? Somebody posted, like, you're posting a video about a movie that's 10 years old. It's going to be on a streaming service.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's only been on, like, TBS for the last 7 years, like, every weekend.
I saw that in the theater one time, and that's the last time I ever played it.
I never saw it in the theater. I rented it.
Yeah, I saw it in the theater.
I'm going to go avoid the spill out at the spaceport again.
Well, yeah, and Mike, next year, why don't you just keep that candy to yourself next year and not infect the population? Good grief!
I don't need all those calories.
Well, just you send some over to my tube. I'll be happy to eat some, but don't give them to the population. My goodness, all kinds of troubles.
Well, thank you for joining us, everybody, in the 25th century.
Well, I want some engineers in the 25th century to listen to this and take it to heart, and see if you can find some pictures of the Enterprise on old microfilm that you may have laying around, and I want to see that built with the technology of today.
All right, I'm gonna go board my cube and get the heck out of here, guys.
All right. Well, we're heading back to Tatooine very soon, so we'll see you. We'll see you then.
You know you can't live without this content, so subscribe to the Hyperspace Podcasting in the 25th Century. Follow us on social media, leave us a review, and join us next time as we take you into the 25th century.